showing this rotation with them. Not all of them will produce a tornado, but some could, and it does look like we've seen a couple now that have off to the southwest. Obviously, a lot of dangerous lightning, very heavy rain. The maroon box, I know there's boxes all over here because the Weather Service is just hoisting warnings left and right. The orange box is a severe thunderstorm warning. The maroon box is a flash flood warning, and that includes parts of St. Tammany, eastern Washington, western Pearl River County until 6 o'clock. And so, this line is moving fairly quickly, but slow enough to where we're getting some really, really heavy rain, and you've got the potential for some of that street flooding out there, so definitely avoid driving in those conditions if you can. The more pressing concern probably at any one point is the strong wind threat and the tornado threat. And Skippy, actually, I'm in here. If you want to holler at somebody in the newsroom maybe and let them know about that report of that tornado here that we had down around the Hahnville area. And so, maybe we can try to work on getting somebody down there for that. And once again, this is just a little while ago. We had reports of damage in the Monts area and also in Hahnville. That is Schoolhouse Road with the house damaged. And then you've got the additional report here that came in from Monts of house damage. And so I would imagine it's not guaranteed. This could just be some wind with that rotation, but actually, our photographer, Cole, who lives down in that area, was near I-310. He sent what clearly was a wall cloud, and you were starting to see the formations, of a funnel cloud and that sort of thing. So I think there's at least a decent chance that we did, in fact, have a tornado touchdown in these areas. Now, notice that tornado warning that was in effect for St. Charles has been canceled, so the Weather Service now feeling that the rotation has diminished enough to not extend that tornado warning. It canceled, or actually expired at 3 o'clock. I guess cancel is not really the right word for that, but you can see the rotation area there just at the beginning of the spillway is where we'd be looking at that. I wouldn't call it necessarily even that good a rotation, but there's certainly some strong wind where you see that bright red. And so, another 10 minutes or so, that'll be passing by the spillway and heading over Lake Pontchartrain. As I mentioned, the causeway is currently closed because of poor visibility here, and that may be the case for a while. I mean, this next cell coming in, which is going to skirt the western side of Kenner, that's going to be moving over the causeway as well. The earlier cell that we were watching that I thought had at least the chance to produce a waterspout is now east of the bridge, and this is heading over towards probably the Lacombe, in between Lacombe and Eden Nile on the north shore. So heads up for that. Some very strong, I think you have very strong wind potential here where you have that sort of bow echo look. And it's right here where I could see us having some very strong wind along the immediate north shore. So heads up for that. Back to that tornado warning. I mean, this is one of the more well-defined areas of rotation I have seen today. That does not mean that there is a tornado on the ground at the moment, but I would say there is at least a probable chance, or at least a decent chance, that you have a tornado, or at least a cell capable of producing a tornado on the ground right now. That is just south of Talashiq. So if you're in that area, please take shelter. Otherwise, this is going to be heading into, you see the new warning box there. So the Weather Service, as we go along, is trying to sort of hone in that warning box. Just south of Talashiq is where you have that rotation. You need to take shelter if you're on the southern end of town there. Also, as you get over towards Industrial, you can see here that we have that on the map at about 3:25, so another 20 minutes from now, and that would be one of the areas that you certainly need to be concerned with, and potentially even over towards, areas just west of Picayune. I mean, this is going to hold together likely, even if the rotation doesn't, the storm is. So really all the way over towards I-59 and Highway 11. I'm just checking some of the data off camera here to see if there's any indication of, and actually there is with this. This is one of the first times today that I've seen what I would consider somewhat a legitimate debris signature. And it looks like it just went away. Let me back this up one frame if I can, right there. So what you're looking at here is the radar picking up on stuff that's not rain, basically. And so this area here, when you have a different color, darker or green, in an area associated also with rotation, that could indicate some debris flying around. And it's already gone. It's already off the latest frame of the radar. But that to me would indicate that we may have, well, it's back now, so that to me would indicate that we have the potential for a little bit of debris to be flying around out here. You know, at the very least, the potential for some tree limbs, some branches, something like that, you know, that the radar's picking up on, which is why we'll continue to highlight that area just south of Talashiq, headed over towards Industrial. If you're in that warning box, and certainly if you're within that cone that I'm drawing here, I think you really need to be concerned about that potential tornado as it heads off to the northeast. And you can see that also corresponds, and this is when you start to line things up here, that also corresponds with, you know, the strongest rotation on the wind data. And so that's where we would have the potential for a tornado on the ground right there that is heading over towards the heading over towards the Pearl River at this point. And that community of Industrial, I think you're right in the path of that. So let's back this up a little bit here. And, you know, I know sometimes this wind data doesn't show up as well, but it is today. And so with that in mind, it's helpful to pick out where we have these areas of rotation. And so you can pick out a couple here. No tornado warnings with these, but obviously you have some broad rotation. And that was my point going back to earlier, where so many of these cells are showing rotation that you have to pay attention to them. And so that cell near Valentine, watch out for, I would be taking shelter there, near Valentine, east of Lockport as that heads off to the northeast. Also that cell back around Homa, you know, some minor signs of rotation there. So take shelter for those as you continue along over the next 5 to 10 minutes as that moves off to the northeast. It looks like the... let's see here. Reading that message from Cole there. He was sending us some video of that potential wall cloud there. Here's the extended tornado now warning up into parts of Pearl River County, also extreme northern Hancock County there. And so obviously the Weather Service is watching what we are. That goes until 3:45 now. And that is a system that continues to move off to the northeast, and this is what we're talking about in terms of following along with that rotation. The Weather Service obviously watching exactly what we are. See if I can get that wind data back on here. I think that's really showing it the best, and we've got so many of these warning boxes going on. And that's what happens to these big events. I mean, obviously they're putting out the warnings where they feel they need to put them out. And so you had that initial small box there. That was the old warning. So now the new warning here, notice this. I mean, this is a huge tornado warning, as a matter of fact, which extends all across south central and really southeastern Pearl River County. So at this point now, you do have that impacting the Carrier area, Tyler, just south of Poplarville. We're talking about Picayune, sort of the north side of Picayune, Richardson being impacted by that. And it's all because of this cell right here that, again, the Weather Service is thinking, you know, this does have what looks to be the potential for a tornado with it. Now, we've lost a little bit of that debris signature here on the latest radar scan. Interestingly enough, there's actually some of that debris signature showing up off to the west of Talashiq here. I don't think we really have anything going on there. There's a flash flood warning for that area, but it doesn't seem like we have too much in the way of rotation or anything in that area. But the rotation is certainly showing up in this Talashiq area, and as you get over here, this huge tornado warning box that is now in effect until 3:45. So definitely something we need to watch out for. Like I said, all these cells won't produce a tornado. Most of them so far today have not. It does look like a couple of them have, or at least one of them has. Back down as you get back down towards St. Charles Parish. Looks like we had that tornado there. And just checking some updates here on Twitter from the St. Charles Parish Sheriff's Office. We have received reports of a tornado that hit Kelowna. So you can see, I guess, different communities that people are sort of attributing this to. I mentioned Monts earlier. The Sheriff's Office says the Kelowna area responding duties have advised of heavy damage to residences in the area of Schoolhouse Road, and deputies are checking residences. So obviously, if you have any issues there, you're asked to call 911 if you have an emergency in your area. So potentially significant damage there. As of 10 minutes ago, the Weather Service had said actually exactly what we were looking at with that confirmed tornado east of Abita Springs. And they highlight in their tweet the debris signature that we were highlighting as well. And it does seem like that has diminished a little bit. And as I say that, it looks like it's come back. So this is the area right here that we're looking at. This is the potential tornado. I've been talking about the industrial area. So as you look at this right here, this area here of just sort of lighter yellow and green, what that is the radar picking up on something different than rain. And saying, you know what, we may have something else flying around here other than rain. And so that is a tool that we use now on these radars to indicate where we could have a tornado. And so debris possible as that is crossing over the Pearl River. There's industrial, there's Ozona, here's Picayune right here. So this is going to move just northwest on the northwest side of Picayune on over towards Ozona. That line right there is Highway 11. And so if you're around the Ozona area, certainly industrial, western, southwestern Pearl River County, Mississippi, you really need to be taking shelter. I think you have still at least a decent threat of a tornado being on the ground. Maybe not as much as what it looked like earlier. You can see the wind data starting to lose a little bit of that look, but certainly a threat. The Weather Service still highlighting that with that very large tornado warning that continues up here, which will cross over I-59. The orange box is a severe thunderstorm warning, which includes really a good portion of St. Tammany Parish. Now, the radar gets a little funny because that's where the radar is. You can see when the sweep goes around, that's the location of the radar, so the storm doesn't look as clear when it's right on top of the radar. But just north of that, very heavy cell. Inadvertent lightning strike counter there. And then just south of that, this line of storms coming over towards the Eden-Io area, twin span. I think that's very heavy rain, very gusty wind threat. So now I would advise don't get on the twin span if you're about to in the next 5 to 10 minutes, because that is going to be a strong line of wind coming across. And then look what we have here. First off, there's a flash flood warning now for parts of St. John and St. Charles Parish after that heavy cell moved through. But look what we have here. Now you have the look of almost a little what we call mezzo-low. I mean, it's like a little miniature comma head coming across the southern parts of Lake Pontchartrain. That line now extending back down towards Kenner, back down towards I-310, and even running in towards the Booty area. That is going to continue to move off to the east as well. Also some very strong wind gust potential over the causeway. Last update I had, the causeway was closed. I think it's likely that we stay closed because of this line moving through. So you have two areas of very heavy wind to meet. This one right here coming towards the twin span. This one right here coming towards the causeway. I would recommend not traveling in the realm of either of those. That one is extending to the south. Now we are on I-10 here. And one thing I want to point out, notice how you go from zero rain to very heavy rain. That's usually an indication right there, a very strong wind gust potential. And so that is now getting into the Kenner, certainly the Metairie area here, Bissonnet Plaza coming up through really right along Clearview, Transcontinental, these areas shortly. That is going to be progressing off to the east. And actually, well, as my director and I were noting earlier, for some reason our camera is upside down, so I guess we can't aim at that direction. But that is something that, I think you want to avoid trying to get out and drive through that heavy downpour potential. All right, looks like a new tornado warning. Here we go. This is farther down to the south. This is that exact cell that we were talking about just a little while ago. If you've been following along with us, and I know this is probably annoying. Nobody likes these long-form severe weather coverages. Certainly, I'd rather not have to be doing it, but stay with us, and we're going to follow these cells as they move through. We want to keep you safe here. If you were with us a little while ago, I mentioned that Grand Bois and Klondike cell. Well, now that cell has a tornado warning with it. So let's go back here. This tornado warning now in effect until 3:45. That is for parts of St. Charles, the extreme eastern parts of St. Charles, they're southeastern, north central Lafourche, northwestern Jefferson Parish, until 3:45. Severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located near Lockport in La Rose, moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. Again, super fast movement on these, and that's what we're looking at right there. So let's put a storm track on that for you. You can see Lockport just off to the west of that. And this is why I was highlighting these cells earlier. Hopefully we were able to give you a little bit of a heads up and you could be following along, because all these, or at least a lot of them, these individual cells have been showing signs of rotation. So, not necessarily a heavily populated area, at least for the short term here. Now, obviously, if this starts getting up into north central Jefferson Parish, that's going to be a different story. And we think about that tornado a few months ago, the big one that moved through New Orleans East, sort of started from this area actually and moved past Estelle and all that. Not to say this will do that certainly, but just sort of a similar track there. So that's going to be moving through areas within that red box. Heads up for that. And again, the other thing I want to point out while we're down here is look at all these other areas of rotation. Here's one coming into Lockport. Here's one just south of Jean Lafitte. Here's another one back southwest of Houma. Now, none of these have tornado warnings on them, but we were doing this exact same thing earlier with this cell near Grand Bois, and it now does have a tornado warning on it. So these are all little areas of rotation, as so many of these storms have been showing rotation through the day that, indicates the potential for a tornado to develop from this if these storms get strong enough, basically, is what you're looking for. I mean, obviously they're rotating. Do they get strong enough? Do they get high enough? Do they build up enough to start to, produce a tornado? And so that is what we're looking at the moment with these cells down to the south. Currently, just that one tornado warning that, again, is moving into a relatively unpopulated area, but certainly still needs watching, as do these other areas. And I would certainly highlight that area near Lockport. I think that needs watching for the potential for an isolated tornado. Let's check back in on the one up to the north. Now, the good news is this one is looking a lot less impressive in terms of that rotation. Could be because we're a little bit closer to the radar, but I think it's far enough to where we would pick it up. So you definitely still want to be sheltered in place here if you're in, let's say, southern parts of Pearl River County, Mississippi, maybe even extreme northern Hancock, but I think most of this is going to be impacting Highway 11 here, I-59, Industrial, Ozuna, those towns I continue to mention, probably North Picayune as well. Stay sheltered in place. The good news is that is looking a little bit less likely for rotation. Now, that being said, I think it's probably what we saw down there around the Mons area. A lot of these cells, when they have that good-looking rotation, sometimes they're producing tornadoes with that. Sometimes as that rotation starts to weaken and these cells start to diminish a little bit, the cell starts to collapse a little bit, that produces that energy and it causes it to wrap up. So you can almost get sort of a last gasp from the cell that produces a tornado as well. So that would be the main threat with this cell, although as I'm talking about that, you can see the Weather Service has canceled that tornado warning. So great news there. It's always nice to be on here and sort of, obviously their line of thinking is the same as ours. So they have canceled that tornado warning for Pearl River County, so that's great news. We'll get you back down to the south here, and this is definitely a more concerning look here, which is just southeast of the Gaines area, home of the Bon Manger Festival, of course. And so look at this right here. Look at this hook right here. That is sort of a classic. I mean, obviously we've all heard hook echo a million times in our life. That is more of that classic look of that. And it's because of this cell being out on its own. If you're with us the past couple of days, and really every severe weather event we have, we talk about those isolated cells being the ones with the bigger threat. And so even though we had a couple of tornado warnings popping up, maybe even a confirmed one within the line to the north, so far through the day it's been the isolated cells that have been giving the highest signs of rotation. And so that one certainly looking a little bit more impressive than what it was a little while ago. That's a pretty nasty looking area of rotation right there. You got that red and green right next to each other. Well-defined couplet, as we call it. When you get those reds and greens right next to each other. And frankly, I look out to the west here. I'm a little surprised we don't have a tornado warning for this one near Lockport. I would say be taking shelter with that as well near the Lockport area, and then sort of heading off to the northeast, almost parallel to the one you have right now. But certainly the most concerning one is this cell, and look what's going to happen here. Now, hopefully this does not hold together. It's going to be running over a relatively unpopulated portion here of southern St. Charles Parish, obviously. The concern is going to be if this continues to hold together and show that rotation, and now all of a sudden we're getting, the potential tornado activity going into areas like Marrero and on the West Bank and that sort of thing. So that's why I don't want to leave you just yet. I want to follow along so we can track this and see what it looks like over the course of the next 20 to 35 minutes here. The good news is the back edge of a lot of this stuff is moving through. So once this initial line pushes through, our severe weather potential really diminishes. But you have numerous cells here on the South Shore, any of which I think, especially the ones out ahead, have the chance to produce some of that rotation as we go through the next 2 to 3 hours before this moves out. North Shore, we're looking at a little bit less tornadic potential now with this cell as it's sort of folding in a little bit, but obviously extremely heavy rainfall. A ton of lightning moving up along I-59, and all that area of rain has produced these flash flood warnings back across the rest of the Florida parishes. So I think you have the risk of at least some street flooding with that. Maybe not a guarantee. I wouldn't say it's a tremendous risk. This stuff's moving pretty quick, but obviously you need to be aware of that when you start talking about storms moving in and producing heavy rain. Heavy rain coming across with this cell over the causeway, the southern portion of the causeway right now. Please be careful. I'd avoid the twin span coming up here if you're trying to do that. I'd also recommend not traveling along parts of I-59, I-10 in eastern St. Tammany around Slidell, and even the I-10 into southern Mississippi. This activity is going to be moving that way. Let's see, just seeing this tweet from the Weather Service. All right, and I think they are doing exactly what I said I'm surprised they haven't done. It looks like they're mentioning a tornado warning for a cell just north of LaRose. That's not popping up on the radar. I guess that's the one we're looking at right here. I thought maybe they issued a warning for that second one as well. Let's check the velocities. That's over towards Lockport, so still no warning for that. But the main concern here, we're going to give you plenty of lead time here on this because this is still in northeastern Lafourche Parish, still has to cross over southern St. Charles Parish, which is this box right here. And then this is central Jefferson Parish. Here's the West Bank Expressway. There's Estelle, Wagaman, obviously. You've got a long time to prepare for this cell, but I definitely want you watching that and taking shelter if you're in these areas. If it holds together, it could impact some of these West Bank areas. And let's say it does do what that big tornado did a few months ago and holds all the way together across the river and then runs up towards the Ninth Ward. Again, we've got a long way to watch this, but it is obviously on that track. And I specifically remember being here that night talking about, that thing moving past Estelle and then winding up towards the river. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I think there is at least some chance of that. These have not been lasting tremendously long through the day. But the Storm Prediction Center in their latest discussion did say, the potential for some long-track tornadoes. And so if that happens, you'd certainly be running into some issues here around Marrero. You can see at 352. Estelle there at 348. I'm going to say Tabatiere, Purdue. I'm sure I'm butchering that name, and I apologize. But obviously that's coming up very shortly here. So any of these spots that we're highlighting, you really need to be taking shelter and staying in your safe place, which as always means the lowest level of your home, interior room, interior hallway, and try to avoid being near an outside wall, obviously avoid being near windows, that sort of thing. And so this is moving over a mainly marshy area, not necessarily a ton of houses there, I would imagine, maybe a couple of camps, something like that. But my concern would be if that does in fact hold together, you head up here into the West Bank locations. And so that would be the main concern. I want to check real quick here while I've got you here, just that debris signature aspect of this, and there's really not anything showing up at the moment with that. But that's the main concern. So hopefully we're giving you enough lead time here to prepare for that. I'll put the main reflectivity back on, the main radar, show you what we're looking at across the area. Again, just so many of these cells showing rotation. Now, the good news is the tornado warnings up on the North Shore canceled. We don't have anything ongoing at the moment. You have I-59 there, obviously extremely heavy rain moving through, some gusty winds as well. And I was just checking to see here if we've gotten any additional damage reports. I don't see any. That doesn't mean that there's not something out there, though, that's been developing. So far, 2 reported tornadoes, it looks like. Could be the same tornado, but we have some around the Honville area. We have some around the Monts area with that cell that pushed through earlier. Here is a new one. So this from 2:54, so about 30 minutes ago, 3 miles southeast of Abita Springs. The fire department reports a tornado. That's the cell we were looking at earlier when we talked about that debris signature. Reported trees down across Highway 36, so heads up for that. That is with that storm that is now well east of that area. It doesn't have the rotational signature that it did earlier. It doesn't look like we have a tornado with that, but basically as it was moving through that area that we were tracking that rotation, it does look like we had a tornado touchdown there, and so you've got some trees down along Highway 36 near Abita Springs, so heads up for that. Obviously could make for some treacherous driving this evening. And keep in mind, a couple hours from now it's pretty dark, so if you don't have to drive in any of these areas once the sun goes down, please don't, because you could run across a down limb or down tree or something very quickly before you even realize what's going on. I'm just trying to check a couple more things here to see if there's any additional reports. Looks like that's the most recent one, along with the one that we had earlier here across parts of St. Charles Parish, which, again, is where this current possible tornado is about to track through. Obviously, a lot of lightning associated with all these storms, so be careful of that. Hoping that we can get this rotation to diminish before it moves up into the West Bank areas. And it is looking a little weaker at this point. But, so we've now crossed over into St. Charles Parish. That's that black line there. We're out of Lafourche. You still have a couple other storms here that are showing rotation. Look at this right here. Just west of Jesuit Bend, heading past Jean Lafitte there. That's heading up towards Belle Chase. No tornado warning on that. May not get one. Doesn't mean we couldn't have a little wind damage, though. And then you look back off to the west of that warning that we have, you still see a little bit of that red-green combination to the southwest of that. Again, not necessarily enough to produce a tornado. I'm just pointing this out to say, hey, these areas could briefly spin something up. We could briefly have a little bit of, wind gust damage, something like that. But definitely the main area is this tornado warning that we have now, south central St. Charles Parish. And I will say the Weather Service in recent years does a great job of sort of redrawing the boxes as we go along. And so you sort of whittle down the area that you're looking at here. And there you go. Look, there's still a pretty well-defined bend in that storm, pretty well-defined hook echo as this is coming across, I believe, is that Lake Salvador, I think? And I apologize if I'm wrong on that. I believe so. Just sort of east of Bayou Gauche there. But either way, this is coming across south central parts of St. Charles Parish. So really no concern for any populated area here. It's right over water. Normally I would sign off in that instance, but I do want to stay on for just a little bit longer simply because this does have the potential to cross over into more populated areas on the West Bank. And I think that would be the biggest concern here if that happens, where we end up with some areas that could see damage, because that is a pretty significant looking area of rotation. There's no question about it. And you can still see that holding together, that red and green combo there. So let's put a recent storm track on that for you. A couple of sweeps recently here of the radars. We'll get you a more maybe well-defined time frame as this heads off to the northeast. So there you go, Estelle around 3:50, which is about 20 minutes from now. Marrero around 25 minutes from now, and then potentially up towards Gretna by almost 4 o'clock. And so, eerily similar to that track we had of that big tornado, and I can't keep track of anything, back sort of late spring there, April, whenever it was that crossed over the river and ran into the Ninth Ward. Not at all to say that this would repeat that. It's just the track and the path of this is very similar to that one that we had at the time. And so we're going to keep an eye on this, obviously, very closely. A couple other areas of rotation there. You notice just northeast of Jean Lafitte, you have a little bit of that red and green combo there, which indicates, and again, if you're just joining us, green means wind going towards the radar site, which is in Slidell, and red means going away from it. And so if you have the tight circulation showing up like you do with this cell, that would mean the wind is sort of bending around like this and then coming back around like this. And it's that tool that we use to indicate where these storms, may be rotating. And we've seen lots of rotational signatures, let's put it that way, as we've gone through the day-to-day to indicate that we could have some potential tornadoes. Now, the good news is this is looking a little bit less impressive here, but I hate even saying that because I don't want anybody to let their guard down. It's not looking quite as well defined as it continues off to the northeast, as it makes its way towards Jefferson Parish, which, again, this warning goes in effect until 3:45. And so the latest report from the Weather Service, we mentioned the Bayou Gulch area, was about 7 miles southeast of that. So they're highlighting all the towns we are, Avondale, Woodmead, Estelle, by around 3:50, and then eventually up towards Marrero, Westwego, and we even saw in that last storm track, Gretna. So that is something that we definitely need to be concerned with. Hopefully this rotation continues to diminish. Keep an eye on that for you. All these cells, though, just so many of them on the South Shore, I think could produce a little rotation at any point. Also, if you're just joining us, no active warnings really on the North Shore except for those flash flood warnings. Those are those maroon boxes. Obviously, the one farther out to the west, I would imagine you're not seeing too many flooding issues there across Tangipahoa and Washington Parish. That line's been gone for a while, and it moved through fairly quickly at the time. But right now, it is right parallel along I-59 through Pearl River County. And you can see a tornado warning just out of our viewing area there, up towards Maxie along Mississippi 49. So if you have maybe some friends or family up there, give them a heads up about that. Otherwise, no tornado warnings in the area except for this one here on the South Shore. And as we look back down to the southwest of that, you still see some of these cells that are popping up. And you've got, let's see if I can highlight these for you here. Here's one right here, east of Galliano. Here comes another one, south of Cocodrie. Got a little line out to the west here. And all those, again, at times, a lot of these cells through the day have been showing signs of rotation. And so that's why we're on here covering this for you. We've already gotten, looks like 2 confirmed tornado reports. I don't know if that makes sense. 2 reports of tornadoes, one around the Hanville and Monts area earlier this afternoon, just about 45 minutes ago, and then also one about 35 minutes ago around Abita Springs on Highway 36. So those are the 2 reports that I have seen so far of damage related to potential but likely tornadoes at this point. And so as we continue to follow along with the wind data here, you can see that is still holding together. It's not as well defined as it was, but the system moving across St. Charles Parish, it is over some water right now, which sometimes can help to maintain that rotation. Obviously, we get water spouts typically a lot quicker than we do other tornadoes, just because it's a little bit easier to pop up something over the water. And so latest report from the Weather Service is talking about that line of storms that we talked about up along I-59. No warnings with that, but they do indicate the potential in Hancock County, southeastern Pearl River County for winds of 40 miles per hour. So I think you're more likely looking at some minor tree damage, something like that, some tree limbs down as this system moves off to the east of I-59 here shortly. And again, another 15 minutes or so, you'd probably be okay to get out and drive along that. Hopefully you've been avoiding it. I would say the heavy activity is just now coming into the twin span, so I'd probably try to avoid travel on that if you can. And then look at this area. This is what I want to highlight right here. This area just east of the radar side along I-10 there, east of Slidell. I mean, that looks like some pretty potent wind to me. And so if you're driving along I-10 and you run into that, that could be dangerous. Very, very poor visibility, very gusty winds. I would avoid travel around that area of eastern St. Tammany into Hancock County. Obviously, we've got some elevated areas there with the bridges as well. That's always a tricky area to drive just on a sunny day. So, I would avoid those areas probably if you're along I-10, you're trying to drive through western Hancock, sketchy travel conditions. If you can avoid doing it why risk any major issue there? And then you get back down to the south. We do have that flash flood warning ongoing for parts of St. John and St. Charles Parish. Haven't seen reports of any flooding at that area. But obviously all this rain has been pretty heavy, which is why some of these flash flood warnings have been issued. Still, the main issue, though, that we're looking at here is this cell that is about to move out of now, it looks like, St. Charles Parish. And I will say the wind data is not looking quite as impressive as it was earlier. And hopefully we can avoid, this moving into a more populated area with that rotation. But it's not gone yet. And that is the concern here, is this is heading, you can see the latest scan. Notice how, let's put the latest storms, we just got a scan in, so let's put a storm track on this for you. And I know this is just sort of wait and see. Normally I wouldn't do this, but it's heading into this area where obviously we have a lot of people. Heading right towards Marrero here at about 3:50, so about another 20 minutes, 3:54 there. About another 20 minutes if this holds together. I really want you to be planning ahead, taking shelter really anywhere along the West Bank Expressway from Avondale to Marrero to Gretna. I think you are at least, if not at a tremendous risk, a slight risk here of seeing a tornado, maybe some wind damage coming through, maybe not even a full tornado, maybe a funnel cloud that drops down and blows a roof off or something like that. But there's obviously a pretty potent part of this storm heading right for you. That includes the Estelle area. And so go ahead and make plans now to be in your safe place, lowest floor of your house, interior room, interior hallway. Get away from doors and windows. Maybe unplug the TV, something like that. If you got some electronics, you don't want to risk at that point as that cell continues to head off to the northeast. And still looking at some, just some really strong wind, I think, with that area of that line, as I mentioned, east of Slidell, coming along I-10. So avoid I-10 if you can, coming out of Hancock County. That looks like very strong wind. And as we go along here, I'll go ahead and point out again, just outside of our area, but for anybody that knows anybody up towards Rock Hill, Mississippi, Maxie, there's Highway 49. You still have that tornado warning ongoing up there as well. But definitely in the main area. And here's another area over the lake. Look at this. Some very gusty winds coming in. And that is heading right over towards sort of the immediate north shore here. So not necessarily saying it's a funnel cloud, but some really, really gusty winds. That's going to be heading towards Eden Isle, White Kitchen, Slidell, those spots. Just a good idea to avoid the roads. Avoid I-10, I-59 in that area if you can, that sort of thing. And I do want to point out with the wind data here what I'm talking about right here. I mean, look at this. You can see this just pretty clear delineation here between Napoleon and Morgan Bluff, and then all the way coming down. That's a pretty good line. Again, the red is going away from the radar, so now you're looking at some pretty potent straight line wind getting pushed east away from the radar, and there's a little rotation on the northern end, which sometimes happens. Yep, there you go. The Weather Service, again, we've been on top of it here pretty much through the afternoon, so the Weather Service is looking at the exact same area we are right now, and as you saw just now live, they have popped on that severe thunderstorm warning for us. So that is for extreme southeastern St. Tammany, western Harrison, and most of Hancock County until 4:30. Let's see here. Severe thunderstorm located near Stennis Space Center. Moving northeast at 35 miles per hour. Wind gust potential of 60 miles per hour, according to the Weather Service here. And so I always like when a warning pops on highlighting the area that I'm talking about at the time, because I know I'm not totally misjudging all this. But again, very, very gusty wind potential. So please avoid that area of I-10 in Hancock County. Winds of 60 miles per hour, potentially, definitely enough to cause some damage. And the highlight of that area, I think, to me, would be right around Napoleon, where you see a little bit of that, not necessarily rotation, but just a little bit of that wind sort of curling around on itself. There is Texas Flat Road right there, just west of Diamond Head. So all these areas heading on up towards west central Harrison County. Very potent wind coming for you, 50, 60 mile per hour gust. Good idea, stay inside, may cause a little bit of wind damage in those areas. So there you go. Continuing to watch this, and again, here is the concern. hopefully you've been following along. I know this is probably boring and annoying, but hopefully you haven't totally tuned out, because this cell is continuing to produce what looks to be well-defined rotation here. And this black line right here is the border of St. Charles and Jefferson Parish. And so we are getting much, much closer now to getting into a populated area as this heads off to the northeast towards Marrero. As a matter of fact, something caught my eye off to the side here. I think we just saw a pretty big lightning flash on our camera looking out towards the river. And I guess, Skippy, my thought would be, we don't need to pull it up now, but maybe just have somebody in a news center maybe just sort of zoom out a little bit and point it down, across that river camera that we have, just sort of point it where it is, maybe zoom out just in case something does pop up. We could see it's kind of foggy and hazy out there too with the rain, so it may be hard to see anything that goes by. But this is going to be coming right along the river here, and so we do have that camera pointed down there for you. If we get anything, we'll let you know. Put the reflectivity back on here. A lot of lightning associated with that. We're already starting to see that making its way up towards West Bank locations, really right along the river at this point. And then here you go, as this continues to move right there. It's that big, it's looks like a C at this point here. And so lightning associated with that. It's this bend right here that we're talking about, the rotation. And so, somebody's listening in News Center. I would point it back towards the bridge point. That's pretty good right there. Maybe zoom out a little bit. The camera, the problem is there's going to be so much rain coming in out ahead of this. I don't know if we can see anything, but if we have the ability to tilt up and zoom out, that may be the way to go on that. So this is going to pass just west of Estelle. I think this is headed right towards the Marrero area. I would not be at all surprised to see the Weather Service sort of extend this tornado warning up into the more populated areas here of Jefferson Parish as we go along, and maybe even include Orleans Parish if this is looking like it holds together, which so far it has been. And so, there's two areas here that I really want to focus on, and that is that area just north of I-10 in southern Mississippi with that strong wind gust potential. Really three, because you have another gust area coming towards the twin span, so you want to avoid that. And then I think still the most likely chance for a tornado, that looks good right there. I'd leave the camera right there, and then if we can pick up some rotation on it, maybe on the backside when the heavy rain clears out, we'll be in a perfect spot to do that. And this is what we're looking at right here, is this rotation coming through just about now to cross over. Let's see here. Here's your St. Charles Jefferson Parish line. This is the rotation that we're looking at right here. And so it would be just about to cross over here. Still relatively unpopulated here, so I don't think ripping up a bunch of houses or anything if there is a tornado. But obviously as you get up towards the West Bank Expressway, that's a much different scenario and a much more concerning scenario if this continues to hold together, which at the moment, obviously it is. And so we've now crossed into, that rotation has now crossed into Jefferson Parish. Looks like it's right over the line. That warning is set to expire, I believe, in about 5 minutes. Let's see here. Tornado warning expected. So I think you'll probably see the Weather Service reissue that. Let's see if we can get some. Let's try to pull up the wind data here. Let's see here. That's a velocity of, let's see, 57 miles per hour. It keeps pulling up the wind data for me. Off camera, it's showing me a velocity of 57. And so you've got what looks to be a combination maybe of 50 going one way, 50 going the other way, 45 to 50 going the other way. So, about 100 mile per hour wind combined. But 50 one way, 50 the other. That's not the highest that you've ever seen for a tornado. The real big tornadoes are like 90 to 100 on each side. I mean, really crazy. But there you go. I mean, this is why I stayed on air for you here, because the Weather Service just now did issue that tornado warning, which does include, as expected here, the immediate New Orleans area. And so this is something that we really need to keep an eye on. Guys, keep that camera pointed in that direction. I know you can't see anything now, but I think you will once the heavy rain moves through. This tornado warning now goes until 4:30. Certainly some good lightning on it. Yep, no doubt about that. And so this is, let's see here. Councilman Scott Walker mentioning these areas that we're talking about as well: Avondale, Marrero, Westwego, Estelle, Woodmere, these spots. Now, keep in mind, there really hasn't been any reports of a tornado from this cell. Not that there probably would be, though, because it's been over the lake. I'm not sure, frankly, hopefully there's no one down there to be looking at this as it's moving over the water. We do have a flood advisory now also for parts of Orleans and St. Tammany, for that heavy rain that's been moving through. So I think the general theme here is don't get out and drive around in this stuff. You could be looking at some gusty winds. You could be looking at some flooded streets. And, of course, you could be looking at an isolated tornado if you're in these areas under these tornado warnings. And so this is what we're looking at until 4:30. Latest report from the Weather Service here says at 3:44, a storm capable of producing a tornado was located near Avondale, moving northeast at 35 miles per hour. And I know we have completely blown out afternoon programming, and I certainly apologize for that. Obviously, I'd rather not be on here talking for 2 hours, but we stayed with you because this cell does look like it could produce a tornado, and it is really following that eerie path that the one several months ago did. You remember it came through northern Jefferson briefly. It hopped over the river into Araby in the 9th Ward. Now, I'm not saying this is going to do anything near that, but it is really following a similar path. As a matter of fact, you can see Araby pops on the map here at 4:05. And so this is something that, I mean, if you're anywhere in the immediate metro area, basically east of Mid-City, you need to be aware of this. If you are downtown, if you know somebody downtown, if you got family working, if somebody's just out, enjoying a holiday lunch or whatever, I mean, everybody needs to be aware that you have a really, really strong storm coming in to the immediate New Orleans area, West Bank first, potentially producing a tornado. And I tell you what, Scott, if you want to, let's pull up that downtown camera. We're not going to see a whole lot at the moment, but we do have some heavy rain. We got a lot of lightning showing up on that. And that's what we're looking at right now. And you can see the lightning flash there, so there's obviously a lot of lightning associated with that. And that is why we're certainly going to keep an eye on this camera here, because if a tornado does develop, it would be, I think pretty much where we have this camera pointed. Obviously, it's very rainy right now. The rain would likely move past us, past the camera, and we may be actually in a great spot to see the potential tornado if there is one. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and you can certainly leave that pulled up in these monitors here, and I'll keep an eye on it as well. Let's go back to the radar, though, and we'll show you what we're looking at here. Again, Araby, Seabrook, Marrero, Estelle, all these areas that we've talked about coming up here over the next few minutes. So I don't think anybody can say if you've been watching this, you don't have lead time on this. Hopefully you're in your safe place in Estelle. Hopefully you're in it in Marrero. You've picked out that spot, and you know where you are and where you're going. You need to stay there until this storm pushes through. Because notice what has happened here. Just over the past couple of frames, the rotation has just become so much more well-defined. Remember for a while there, it was just kind of a, let's call it a mild red and green. I mean, it didn't look that impressive. Well, now all of a sudden this has wound up again. And it's complete chance, obviously, that this is where that other one passed by. But obviously a very similar setup where you have this rotation possible with all these cells. And now all of a sudden you've got a pretty strong, what we call a couplet, which is basically what it means, a couple, the color of the red and the green right next to each other. You've got a pretty strong, well-defined couplet moving up into this area that we dealt with this a few months ago. And so lightning beginning to increase on the camera as well. Let's pull back up the regular radar look here, give you an idea what that looks like. You're starting to see, again, just let me turn that back on, frequent lightning. So nobody needs to be outside right now if you're in the, let's say, downtown New Orleans, really anywhere, uptown, downtown, whatever the case, over on the West Bank, Marrero, Gretna, Algiers, stay sheltered in place, of course. And then what you're really looking at here is this hook echo, which I'm sure you've heard that term a million times today. Right here, it's a little bend. The storm even looks like it's picking up speed. Look how far into that new warning box it already is. So right here, this is headed right up towards Marrero, so please be sheltered in place right over the West Bank Expressway. If you got somebody that's about to head out on that, let's get them to wait on that, certainly. Over towards Terrytown, this right here is the connection bridge. So, we're crossing right over that here, most likely. And really the best look is on that velocity. And so for anybody that's just joining us, red is away from the radar, green is towards. And this is one of the strongest signatures that we have seen so far today. When you start dipping into this light blue shading here, now you are starting to get up into the wind speeds of 80, 90 miles per hour in one direction. I think it's probably going to pull it up off camera for me, but let me see what it says. It's going to pull up that warning there. This is pulling up velocities, 60, 70 miles per hour at least. And so that is the main concern when you get here. We can even zoom in a little bit more here. Look at Westwego, Marrero. I don't have necessarily a ton of room on this view to draw a storm track, but that gives you a zoomed in look of where that is. Walkertown, another one popping up on the map there. I like to do that storm track close in just so it can pick up some of these smaller communities. If you're in Walkertown, Harvey, you need to be aware of that. And this is definitely getting ready to cross over the West Bank Expressway, heading right across the river shortly into downtown New Orleans, probably the CBD. Now, do we have a massive tornado rolling through the CBD? Obviously that doesn't happen too often. But it's not to say that we couldn't have some sort of tornado rolling through. And so as you look back at the regular radar look here, still showing that little hook there, it definitely does have sort of a supercell look. You get this right here. You get this very red, heavy rain core, which a lot of times if there is hail, it would be there. We haven't really seen any hail today. That green color right there is just not going to indicate that much hail, but that's where it would be. But just sort of that classic look of that being your real core of the heavy rain, and then just on the south end of that, that's where those wall clouds form. Potential tornado right in that hook heading right towards Marrero. I'll tell you what, Blue, if you want to pull back up that camera just so people can get an idea of the frequent lightning out here. We just have so much rain, you're really not going to be able to see much, but this lightning is certainly almost nonstop here as that storm approaches. I got to tell you, we're going to keep an eye on that look. This is obviously extremely rainy weather outside right now. That is on the East Bank side, so that is at Place St. Charles. You are looking across the river towards the connection. And you are looking through that very heavy zone that I just mentioned with that red color, indicating, I hate to say the strongest part of the storm, but the core of the storm, certainly. And that's what we're looking through. Now, once that passes by this camera, it's conceivable we would have a look at, what may or may not be a wall cloud, a funnel cloud, something like that. So we're definitely going to keep an eye on that for you here as we go through the next few moments. So up into Marrero is where we're talking about at the moment. Just a really, really well-defined area of rotation. We can bring it back to the radar here. And we're coming into, almost being right over the West Bank Expressway at the moment. And I'm also trying to put on that debris tracker. If you've been with us over the past 1 to 2 hours, this is normal red is rain, and there's obviously a lot going on here. But this area right here would be concerning, because when you have an area of, a little bit of a different, what this is the radar picking up on, again, red being rain, so normal water droplets, and then these other colors, something else other than water. It can pick that up. And so when you have those zones like this that correspond in the almost exact same area as that rotation, you say, uh-oh, that looks like a tornado on the ground to me. And right now, this looks like a tornado on the ground. Look at this. We've now even enhanced this color coding, if you will. Now you've got some of these oranges and pinks showing up in here. You've got some of these light blues on the other side. This is just a tremendously strong, as I mentioned that term, couplet. we're not talking chicken here, couple it earlier, of that wind just circulating right around itself. I mean, that is just a well-defined, tight rotation there within that area. And unfortunately, that is also correlating with our debris tracker at almost the exact same time. Look at this right here, right near Marrero, right over the West Bank Expressway. Now, I'm not going to go out and say this is 100% debris from a tornado on the ground, but I got to tell you, it looks pretty close. And it's probably one of the better indications that I've seen so far today of what could be a tornado on the ground, moving right along the West Bank Expressway, following almost the exact same path that cell did, a few months ago when it was in Araby and the Ninth Ward in those spots. So, as we get into some of these colors here, looking at maybe a 70 to 80 mile per hour, as we call it, gate-to-gate shear on the color combo. So you'd be looking at maybe 80 going one way, 70 or 80 going the other way. So a total maybe of 140 miles per hour combined wind. Not to say again that that's actually on the ground that strong right now, but that gives you an idea of kind of the math that we're looking at here. So you could be looking at a swirling area on the ground of 100, 120 miles per hour, something like that. And I can't confirm that, obviously, because I'm in here, but I think that's probably the best look that we've seen so far today. And I keep checking the Weather Service Twitter as well to see if they've put out any additional reports. They're still basically just highlighting that warning. Sometimes you can get, people posting reports. And look, if you see anything, send it to us, news@WGNO.com. We'd love to get some reports. Don't walk out there and try to take a picture of this thing if you're nearby. But if you are around that area and you see maybe a funnel cloud, or in the next 5 to 10 minutes, if you see some damage out there, if it's lightning, don't go out and take a picture. Just shoot us a text, shoot us an email that says, hey guys, we've got some damage. I see a roof down or a tree down or some power lines down over here on the West Bank, something like that, if you want to, and you can help us figure out exactly what's going on the ground at that point. Latest update here from the Causeway. The bridge back open. So there you go. Causeway back open now. It was closed because of that earlier line of storms that we had moving through. Look at this cell right here now heading over basically Algiers Point and the connection. So this line right here, you see on the radar there, right here, that is your connection bridge coming across the river. And then, of course, you run into I-10 there. And so this cell continues to produce just a ton of lightning. I'm watching it off camera here. We got pulled up in the studio. A ton of lightning with this cell. Don't really see any indications of a tornado, but there's a ton of rain, so it would be hard probably to see that at this point anyway. But it's got to be very close, I think, to being on the ground. Maybe a large funnel cloud if we don't actually have something on the ground producing damage. But you can see where that hook is right there, sort of that's coming around. Let me get my pointer back here. That's coming around, basically wrapping around into Gretna. And I mentioned this earlier with one of the cells earlier, and I don't think that's what that is. If there was a debris ball showing up on radar, which would be, they usually show up as round, the areas where there's debris flying around, it would be that. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily that this storm is strong enough to be producing that, but it's possible that that is at least some indication there of some debris flying around. And this is really the more impressive look here. As I zoom out, notice everything's red. So that's just indicating regular rainfall. And as we zoom in, right next to where that rotation is showing up, basically right over the expressway and the Crescent City connection, you have this debris tracker which is picking up on something other than what the radar thinks is rain. Could be, maybe just a couple tree branches, something like that. Sorry about that, somebody wanting a radio hit. Clearly I'm not able to do that right now. But you have this, maybe it is a little bit of hail mixed in, something like that. But there's something going on in this area, is the theme here that the radar is trying to point out, that says, hey, this isn't just normal rain. This is something else. And you notice that red box that just popped on there. That is the latest update here from the Weather Service. So let me put back on the reflectivity here. That's, as I mentioned a little while ago, they're really good about this now. As these storms move along, they don't just leave the old boxes up there. They said they're issuing new ones and, letting you know what's going on. So this is a new tornado warning now until 4:30. Let's see here. Oh, wow. Okay, there you go. That's the first I've seen of a confirmed tornado via radar and from ham radio operator who spotted a tornado on the ground near Lapalco on the West Bank. Okay, so once again, we're in lockstep here going through this with you in real time with what the Weather Service is seeing. They are also saying that when they look at that debris signature, that's obviously something going on. That's actually some debris getting lofted up from a tornado on the ground. So they are willing to confirm this via radar. Ham radio operator on the West Bank says, yes, this was a confirmed tornado near Gretna and Harvey, moving northeast at 35 miles per hour. And so this is going to continue off to the northeast. I mean, again, it's almost the identical track as to that big one that moved through Arabi a few months ago. Hopefully, this is not a repeat of that, but it is almost the exact same track as that one was moving. Let's put the wind data back on here because this doesn't look quite as defined as what it did a little while ago. But here you go. I mean, this is unbelievable to me how this is going to track over the exact same spot just about. And I'm looking out on our river camera here, and unfortunately we've got so much rain and water on it. I just don't think we have a chance really to see anything here. But so again, there's the connection bridge right here. Here is I-10. Obviously, when you start talking about, the 9th Ward and Arabi over towards Chalmette, you're right in this area here. And this tornado is going to go into these exact same spots. And I got to tell you, it's not too often that we're on air with you for 30 minutes saying, let's see if a tornado happens in this area as it moves up. But certainly, I guess I'm glad we were on for you because, indeed, it does look like we have a confirmed tornado now on the West Bank. Guys in the control room, you may want to yell at the newsroom just to make sure they're aware of that. New Orleans Weather Service tweeting the same thing that we were just talking about on air here, that tornado debris signature, TDS is what it's called. When we put on that debris tracker, they were saying the exact same thing, that this is a confirmed tornado. And you can see now we're starting to get sort of a broad area of little stuff showing up, so it makes it even a little harder to pick out. But if you did have to pick out one zone of debris getting tossed around, I would pick two, actually. McDonoughville right here south of Algiers, you could call that some debris. And then also over here, right really by the Superdome at that point, also a little bit of debris showing up. Now that could just be the radar. Could be the radar, if it's on a low sweep, could be picking up the Superdome, I guess, although I've never seen that before. But definitely there's some debris getting indicated here on the radar. And so this is what seems to be at least a previously confirmed tornado, likely still a tornado on the ground. I'm looking at our Metro Cam here. We're looking right at this area. I can't believe we really can't see anything. You guys are free to pan around back there and see if, the clouds are certainly very low. Lightning, obviously. There's clearly not a tornado right on the connection bridge, although by radar, it looks like it would be very close. So if anything, you guys may want to pan just a little bit. Boy, I don't even know. Maybe a little bit to the left. Whoever's working the control room back there, Dick Ray, maybe. Not too much. That's probably way too much. But I guess just kind of keep a scan on that and see if we can pick anything up. Just the low clouds. You can certainly see the low clouds behind the rain. I don't even know if we have windshield wipers on that camera, but definitely reports of a tornado on the West Bank near Gretna. And so that has now, moved off to the east here as we are continuing to watch this cell as it progresses along. And so, let's see here. I'm trying to see if there's any more. This is 4 minutes ago from the Weather Service. Basically the same thing, ham radio operator near Lapalco Boulevard. So this thing has definitely crossed over the river, and we've got so much water and just haze on that. It's Could have gone right on. I mean, I've been watching that camera the whole time. It could have gone right across that, and we just didn't get to see it there. But nevertheless, let's come back to radar for the time being. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll show you where it looks like this thing is heading right now. It's sort of on the eastern side, the southeastern side of that warning box is where that is right now, over towards Araby. And the good news is we're starting to lose a little bit of definition on that rotational signature here. And so hopefully we can start to see this thing lifting up a little bit. And again, you're looking across the river right over at Algiers Point there. And so that may be actually just a little bit behind the storm, which looks like it's heading more towards Chalmette. Certainly an ominous looking sky, but nothing on that look to really indicate, hey, there's a tornado right in front of us. Sky can pop back up the radar, and I'll show everybody where we're looking at that rotation here, right over Araby. Now, again, you notice that is not looking as impressive as what it was when we had that big area of reds and oranges showing up in the pinks with the greens. It's starting to diminish a little bit, and so hopefully that trend continues. No guarantees, though. Obviously, we want to stay with you until that happens. As I've said, almost the identical track of that big one a few months ago. That's going to continue off to the northeast up towards the Michoud area. So again, early heads up there through Araby, the 9th Ward, Michoud, all those spots. Take shelter if you're in those zones. And I'm going to zoom out real quick and dip you down to the south real quick here. We don't have any other tornado warnings, but maybe if you just checked in with us and missed what I was talking about earlier, the setup of the day. So many of these cells that are producing are just spinning around. Not all of them have produced tornado warnings. Certainly not all have produced tornadoes. I think we're up to 3 now. But here's what we're talking about. Just look at this cell down here in central Plaquemines Parish right near the Phoenix area. I mean, that is another pretty good rotational signature. Again, I'm surprised there's not a tornado warning on that. There may be one that pops up here shortly, but it just gives you an idea of all these cells, how they are popping up and producing some rotation. Here comes another one near Cocodrie. You see that. And another one near Grand Isle, in fact. So they're all over the place. There's another one in east central Hancock County, sort of a broad rotation where we have that severe thunderstorm warning south of Crane Creek. So again, just be aware that, a lot of these have the potential here to show some rotation. Let's see if I can pop on a storm report here. I don't think it's made it into the system. I was going to try to show the little icon of where that report would be, but not with us yet. So you can see there, right on the border there, right through Araby is where that rotation still is. That's your Orleans Parish, St. Bernard Parish border. And so as you're heading out past Araby there, this is going to continue on up into cross back over into Orleans Parish, head up towards the Michoud Boulevard area. I don't think it's as well-defined as what it was a little while ago, but we certainly could still be looking at some broad rotation. As a matter of fact, see, this is what I was talking about earlier. Pull back up, Scott, if you would, that camera that we've been watching. Now that the rain has cleared out, and I think we're really past the point of the tornado here, but now that we've seen that rain pass by, you can see the circulation in the clouds. Look how low those clouds are. You've got that circulation, and you can see those clouds spinning around. And so that's the zone that we're watching as that system continues up past Araby and heads in that direction. If you guys want, I tell you what, we're going to toss it out to our reporter, Amy Russo. You guys can pan left on that camera a little bit. We'll see if we see any flashes or anything like that. But let's go to Amy. She's live in St. Charles Parish. Amy, we talked about that confirmed tornado earlier this afternoon. Tell us what it looks like out there and where you are.
Yeah, Hank, we're here in Kelowna at Kelowna Drive and Railroad Road, where you can see there is a lot of first responders out here right now assessing that storm damage out here to help. We are told most of that damage is actually across the way over on Post Street, but as of right now, we cannot safely get over that way, so that's why we're here over near Railroad Road. There's heavy damage out here, though, along the way. We've seen lots of trees and yards just completely taken down. We've seen debris in the roadways over on River Road when we were coming down to St. Charles Parish. That's where a lot of the debris is where a lot of that debris is that we're seeing now. We do know right now there is going to be a press conference over here in just a little bit, talking about what is going on in St. Charles Parish, about the damage, about what residents are seeing. As of right now, we do know there has been one confirmed death. That's from President Matt Jewell, who has also declared a state of emergency due to the severe weather out here. And like I said, you can see what he's talking about right now. Lots of first responders out here. I mean, easily at least 20 right here along Railroad Drive, and we can only expect to see more. We've been seeing a lot of first responders as we've been out here already, really along all of these side streets. We were pretty lucky to get down this one on Kelowna Drive because most of them are shut down due to the debris in the roadways. And as you can see, Chris, if you want to pan to the left, lots of neighbors are out just kind of in shock of what they're seeing out here. They tell me they're shocked that this has happened in their neighborhood, and hopefully it is cleaned up in a quick amount of time. But like I said, lots of debris out here right now. Really not safe to drive on the roadways. Lots of puddling happening. If you're going to come outside, I just honestly wouldn't. I don't believe it's safe to come out here at this moment. Like Hank said earlier, a tornado has touched down in Kelowna. We do know one person is dead. That is from President Matt Jewell. There's power lines down in the area. Lots of structure damage. Gas lines down. Even as we're out here right now, we can smell a light aroma of gas. So we will be sure to check in on that as well. But like we said, lots of damage out here right now. Really not safe to get out on the streets. Puddling, trees down, power lines down. There's damage to homes. One person dead. A state of emergency due to the severe weather out here. And of course, we're going to be attending that press conference to find out exactly what is going on, how bad the damage really is, and we'll check back with you guys in a few minutes. Hank?
All right, Amy, thank you so much. That is Amy Russo reporting for us out there. St. Charles Parish, great job, Amy. They hustled out there, obviously, in the midst of this ongoing strong weather. To give you that report, we're going to have much more from her coming up tonight, of course, on WGNO News at 5, 6, and 10. But as you heard her say, we did have that confirmed tornado earlier. That's one of the areas we were on air with you when that moved through in the Kelowna area. Unfortunately, one fatality this afternoon with that. So we never like to see that. And you know, obviously all our thoughts are with the family there, and hopefully we'll have more information on that scenario out there. But, you know, especially the takeaway here that she mentioned, so many of these areas, whether or not you've had a tornado hit, you could have some downed trees, you could have some downed power lines. We had reports earlier from the Abita Springs area, Highway 36, of some downed trees over the road. So just stay inside, especially in these hard-hit areas. Some damage reported over on La Palco near West Wego and Gretna. You know, let the first responders do their thing. We talk about it all the time. Try to stay inside, that sort of thing, and avoid getting out and traveling in those spots. What we are looking at here is the tornado warning we recently had, and you can see the Weather Service has sort of whittled it down again up into Orleans Parish, and says, let's see here, heading towards the Lakefront Airport, Interstate 10, between mile markers 241 and 248. A tornado is on the ground at the time they issued this warning. And so we have followed this, and I know this has been probably very long and exhausting for you through the afternoon to stay with us, because we had this cell really even before there was a tornado warning issued with it. We were talking about this down in central parts of Lafourche Parish around the Grand Bois area. And so the Weather Service issued a tornado warning. It came across southern parts of St. Charles Parish through Lake Salvador area, and then, you know, the question was, would the rotation hold together as it made its way up in the metro area? Unfortunately, it did, and so we did have damage reported and touchdown reported over there on the West Bank. And so now, Weather Service saying a tornado is on the ground still. I think there's probably a little bit less of a chance of that now, as that rotation doesn't look as strong. You know, this is the debris tracker, which is interesting. Normally when you start talking about debris from a tornado, you're talking about a pretty centralized area. And this is picking up on stuff flying around all over the place, which could be, you know, lingering debris coming from the clouds from earlier. Could be, you know, maybe just some leaves or something being blown around. I don't think that would pick up as well, but you get the idea. And we're not looking at necessarily that debris signature as ideally as what we were earlier. But that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods necessarily, because this is still the potential for a dangerous situation. It's a storm that's coming up almost exactly in the same spots that we were dealing with a few months ago with that significant tornado that moved through Arabi. I don't think this is of that magnitude, certainly, but you can see that tornado warning really up along I-10, Highway 90 there. Let's see here. This is Chef Highway. Highway 90 past Michoud on over towards Venetian Isles, and then here's your I-10, so obviously you need to be avoiding that. Just checking here. This is a tweet from JP Councilman Scott Walker. Power flashes around Gretna. So that's with that tornado that, was on the ground over there. And again, we were trying to see that on our downtown camera. I think we got, we just had too much rain that we were trying to look through to actually see any of that. But nevertheless, you had some power flashes over there in Gretna. That debris signature continuing past Arabi, so almost the exact same track as that previous bad tornado that we had just a few months ago. Now, looking at the radar here, the good news is that this does not seem to be showing up as good as what it was earlier, and frankly, nowhere close in terms of rotation. The strongest wind here looks to have even transitioned out of the warning box now and moving along just south of I-10, south of South Point here. And so you can see that really within the warning box, there's none of that red and green combo. To me, the strong wind would be right here between South Point and Venetian Isles, headed off to the east. So I think this cell is probably starting to unwind. I think we're likely looking at not a tornado on the ground anymore. And what you're looking at now is this transitioning similar to what that cell did up to the north. You got that severe thunderstorm warning here across Hancock and Harrison County, because that sort of transitioned into a severe wind potential. I think that's probably what you're seeing here as this continues off to the east. You can start to see, notice that I mentioned this a long time ago when that other cell was coming into Kenner, but see this right here, that gradient, you get really not much rain, then all of a sudden very heavy rain, very tight gradient. That usually indicates very strong wind pushing the rain towards the front of the storm. And I think that more likely is what you're getting right now, heading into Venetian Isles and those areas, as opposed to necessarily a tornado on the ground. So, a little bit of good news there. Obviously, this line continues back through New Orleans, and then back down to where this whole thing started, which was sort of just northeast of that Tabatiere Purdue landmark there, marker. And again, I surely I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but that's where this whole thing was coming from earlier, and we followed it basically from that point. The other thing I want to notice, I mentioned this a few times today, I want to put this velocity back on for you. The wind data, again, the one we're watching, not that impressive, but look at this headed towards Wood Lake. I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. The ingredients in the atmosphere, so many of these storms are popping up and they're just rotating. I mean, so many of these, we had like 8 tornado warnings at one point earlier in St. Tammany. These things are just spinning like a top out there. And so you've got some rotation showing up with that cell south of Wood Lake. Here's one right over Galliano that you've got some rotation with. Here's another one over towards Chauvin. Again, I'm picking out these little red and green combo areas. Not to, there's obviously no tornado warnings right now with any of these. Here's another one right near Grand Isle, as a matter of fact, just on the western side, the bay side of Grand Isle. So there's no tornado warnings with any of these, but they're obviously rotating. And so I'm showing you this to indicate that at any point, really, you may have a tornado warning develop. And at the very least, some wind damage. Maybe a brief tornado pops up. You don't have to have a tornado warning to have a tornado. You've got rotation in some of this. You could have a tornado that briefly dips down, or at least a funnel cloud, and there was no warning on it. So that's why I do want to make you aware that there are some other cells here that we're looking at that certainly do have the potential for some intensity. That one has moved out, though, mainly of the warned area here. The part of the storm that was producing that tornado is now sort of on the western side of Venetian Isles. and moving off to the northeast. Here's that cell that I was just pointing at down there towards Wood Lake. I mean, I could pop a tornado warning on that. The Weather Service has not. I've seen tornado warnings on less, let's put it that way. And so I think if you're in the Wood Lake area, I really want you to be taking shelter there. Make sure you're in a safe place. Maybe some camps down there. Somebody's at the camp. Trying to get in a safe place. Look at that, heading up towards Reggio and Hopedale and Shell Beach. Y'all keep an eye on that storm. That one looks pretty ugly to me. Let's see here. Let's find maybe some more rotation now just east of Eden Isle. I think you're seeing a little bit more broad rotation heading over towards the Pearlington area. So I think some of this activity from where that tornado was on the ground is going to continue to shift off to the east. Here's our tornado warning still in effect back here. I'm not overly concerned with a tornado on the ground in that area at the moment. I think what you have here are sort of broader areas of circulation. Very strong wind, though, near Pearlington right there, I think. And so, again, be careful of that. I would advise against heading out in that area. And so we're just, sort of following along these areas as they've been moving through. So again, to recap, what we've seen so far today is a tornado east, and those orange boxes up there are severe thunderstorm warnings, so watch out for strong wind gusts there. Flooding potential in the maroon boxes, those are flash flood warnings. We've had one tornado reported east and southeast of Abita Springs with trees down along Highway 36. We've had reports of damage and unfortunately one death from our Amy Russo out in the Kelowna area with that tornado that moved through earlier this afternoon. We have also had a confirmed tornado on the ground on the West Bank near Gretna. It looks like that again hopped the river towards Araby, and I think has now luckily diminished at this point. And we're still watching some of these additional cells, the most concerning of which to me continues to be that one down by Wood Lake. And so that is where we are at the moment. That tornado warning for New Orleans East expires in 7 minutes. I doubt we see that reissued. We'll put the wind data on there. There's that Wood Lake area. There's not really much rotation, if any, frankly, showing up within that warning area. Now, what is broad rotation to me, and almost the wrong way, remember red's going away from the radar, green's coming towards, so this is almost looks like clockwise circulation, even though it shouldn't be theoretically, is this broad area circulation near Pearlington. So I think at the very least you could be getting some strong wind gust potential coming into here. There's Highway 90 coming into southern parts of Hancock County, so heads up for that. And as we back this down to the southwest, I seriously doubt, and you notice here also now we have a flash flood warning that has been issued for, and actually if you have the WGNO weather app, that just dinged you. You have a flash flood warning here for the entire metro area until 7:30 this evening. And so that's for parts of Jefferson, Orleans, St. Bernard, St. Charles. According to the Weather Service, heavy rain has fallen between 1.5 and 2.5 inches of rain have fallen. And obviously we still have heavy rain falling. So not only do we have that tornado that is moving out, but we now have the street flood threat here and I'm just